The sound of gunfire tore through the evening air as Hazel Blackburn ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It was 1876 in the unforgiving Arizona Territory, and what had started as a simple journey to reunite with her aunt in Tucson had transformed into a nightmare when a gang of outlaws ambushed the stagecoach. "Get the girl!" a gravelly voice commanded. Rough hands grabbed her arms, yanking her from her hiding place despite her desperate struggles. Her honey-colored hair had come loose from its pins, falling in tangled waves around her dirt-streaked face. "Let me go!" Hazel shouted, fighting against the iron grip of the man who dragged her toward the center of the small mining outpost of Copper Springs. The settlement consisted of little more than a saloon, general store, and a handful of ramshackle buildings that had sprung up around a modest copper mining operation. 2 days earlier, Hazel had been teaching at a small schoolhouse in Missouri, her future carefully planned. Then the telegram arrived bearing news of her parents' deaths from fever. At 22, she'd packed her belongings and headed west to her only remaining family. Now, the outlaws who had attacked her stagecoach were hauling her toward the center of town, while the other passengers lay dead in the dirt. "Looky what we got here, boys," the leader announced, shoving Hazel forward. He was a tall man with a pockmarked face and yellowed teeth, his breath reeking of whiskey as he circled her like a vulture. "Pretty little thing, ain't she? Educated too, from the looks of her." The outlaws, 6 in total, had forced the townspeople to gather in front of the saloon. Women clutched their children close while men stared at the ground, unwilling to challenge the armed bandits who had overtaken their small settlement. "Tonight, we're gonna have ourselves an auction," the leader announced, cocking his pistol for emphasis. "This fine specimen needs a new home, and whoever's got the most cash gets to take her." He grabbed Hazel's chin, turning her face roughly as if inspecting livestock. "Bidding starts at $50. Hazel's blood ran cold. She'd heard stories of women being sold to mining camps or worse, but never imagined she'd face such a fate. Her eyes darted around desperately, searching for any sign of help among the cowed townsfolk. That's when she saw him, a tall figure leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the others, he wasn't cowering. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but there was a dangerous stillness about him that made even the outlaws glance his way nervously. "I said $50, the leader repeated, waving his gun impatiently. "Who'll give me 50 for this schoolmarm?" The stranger pushed himself away from the post, his spurs jingling softly as he stepped forward into the light of the lanterns. His face came into view weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes the color of a thunderstorm. A long duster coat hung from his broad shoulders, and the handles of twin Colt revolvers peeked from holsters at his hips. "I'll kill the first man who bids," he said, his voice low but carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. It wasn't a boast or a threat, just a simple statement of fact. The outlaw leader's face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Name's Garrett Landon." He kept his hands loose at his sides, but everyone present could sense the lethal capability in those calloused fingers. "And I'm suggesting you let the lady go." Hazel felt a surge of hope as she looked at this man who'd stepped forward when no one else would. There was something in his eyes, a quiet intensity that spoke of a man who meant exactly what he said. The leader's laugh was harsh. "You're outnumbered, cowboy. 6-1. Garrett's expression didn't change. "Then it's an unfair fight." A heartbeat of silence followed before he added, "For you." One of the outlaws, a nervous young man with a patchy beard, shifted uneasily. "Boss, I think that's Garrett Landon. The one they call the Ghost." The leader's eyes narrowed. "The bounty hunter? 7 men at White Rock," another outlaw muttered. "Took 'em all down without getting so much as a scratch." A tense silence fell over the gathering as the outlaws exchanged uneasy glances. Even Hazel had heard whispers of a legendary bounty hunter who tracked the worst criminals across the territories. A man so skilled with his guns that some claimed he could draw and fire before his opponent's hand even touched their weapon. The outlaw leader tightened his grip on Hazel's arm, making her wince. "Maybe I got something you want more than a fight, Landon." He pressed his pistol to Hazel's temple. "Back off or the girl dies right here." Garrett's eyes met Hazel's, and in that brief connection, she found herself trusting this stranger with her life. There was compassion beneath the steel in his gaze. "That's not going to happen," Garrett replied, his voice steady. "You're going to let her go, and then you're going to leave this town. Or you can try to kill me. Your choice." The leader's face twisted with rage and fear, a dangerous combination. "Kill him," he shouted to his men. What happened next was so fast that Hazel barely comprehended it. Garrett's hands moved in a blur, drawing both pistols as he dove to the side. 2 outlaws fell before they could even clear leather. A third got off a wild shot that splintered the wood of the saloon door as Garrett rolled to one knee and fired twice more. The leader shoved Hazel aside and aimed his pistol, but Garrett was faster. The shot echoed across the street, and the outlaw crumpled, his gun falling from lifeless fingers. The remaining outlaws broke, running for their horses. Garrett let them go, holstering one pistol while keeping the other trained on their retreating forms. Only when the thunder of hooves faded did he turn to where Hazel sat in the dirt, her dress torn and dirty but otherwise unharmed. "You all right, miss?" he asked, holstering his second pistol and offering her his hand. Hazel stared up at him, her mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. His hand remained extended, steady and patient. "Yes," she finally managed, placing her trembling hand in his. "Thanks to you." His palm was calloused but warm as he helped her to her feet. "Garrett Landon," he said, though the introduction was unnecessary after the events that had just unfolded. "Hazel Blackburn," she replied, attempting to straighten her disheveled appearance. "I was on the stagecoach to Tucson when those men attacked." The townspeople were emerging from their shock, approaching cautiously as if still uncertain the danger had truly passed. "You killed Four Finger Frank," the saloon keeper said, staring at the bodies in the street. "He and his gang have been terrorizing settlements across 3 territories." "I know," Garrett replied simply. "I've been tracking them for 2 weeks." An older woman pushed through the crowd, offering Hazel a shawl. "Come with me, dear. Let's get you cleaned up." Hazel wrapped the shawl around her shoulders gratefully but hesitated, looking back at Garrett. "Will you be staying in town?" Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps surprise at her interest. "I need to notify the marshal about what happened here. I'll be around for a day or 2. She nodded, suddenly aware of how inappropriate it might seem for her to want this dangerous man to stay. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she'd felt when their eyes met, or the way her heart raced when he'd stepped forward to defend her. "Thank you," she said again, the words woefully inadequate for what he'd done. Garrett tipped his hat slightly. "Madam." As the kind woman led her away, Hazel couldn't help glancing back at the tall figure standing amid the chaos he'd created to save her. Garrett Landon was watching her go, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the window of the small room above the general store where the shopkeeper's wife had let Hazel spend the night. Her borrowed nightgown was clean but scratchy, and her dreams had been filled with gunfire and the intense gray eyes of her rescuer. After washing and dressing in clothes the townswomen had gathered for her a simple blue dress that was a bit loose in the waist. Hazel made her way downstairs. The general store was already busy with customers, many of whom fell silent when she appeared, then resumed their conversations in hushed tones. "There she is," the shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Patterson, said warmly. Feeling better this morning, dear? Much, thank you, Hazel replied, touching her hair self-consciously. She'd managed to untangle it and pin it back into a simple bun. But without her personal items, she felt disheveled. We've arranged for you to continue to Tucson on tomorrow's stage, Mrs. Patterson explained. Until then, you're welcome to stay with us. That's very kind, Hazel said, though her thoughts immediately turned to Garrett. Would he be leaving today as well? The thought of never seeing him again created an unexpected ache in her chest. As if reading her thoughts, Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. Your cowboy is over at the sheriff's office. They're dealing with, well, the aftermath. He's not my cowboy, Hazel corrected quickly, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. Of course not, dear. But if you're looking to thank him properly, Millie at the cafe makes the best apple pie west of the Mississippi. Taking the hint, Hazel soon found herself carrying a still warm pie across the dusty main street toward the small building that served as both jail and sheriff's office. She paused outside, suddenly nervous. What would she say to him in the light of day? Would he think her forward for seeking him out? Before she could decide whether to enter or retreat, the door opened, and Garrett stepped out, nearly colliding with her. His quick reflexes saved the pie as he steadied her with gentle hands. Miss Blackburn, he said, surprise evident in his voice. His hat was off, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. In the daylight, she could see that his eyes weren't simply gray but flecked with blue, like storm clouds shot through with lightning. Mr. Landon, she responded, finding her voice. I brought you pie. The moment the words left her mouth, she wanted to sink into the ground from embarrassment. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she'd seen from him. That's mighty kind of you. An awkward silence stretched between them until Hazel gathered her courage. I was hoping we might talk. I never properly thanked you for what you did. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. I was just heading to the cafe for coffee. They walked side by side down the street, attracting curious glances from the townsfolk. Garrett carried the pie with the same careful attention he seemed to give everything. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun, and a thin scar that ran along his jawline. At the cafe, they found a quiet corner table. Millie, the proprietress, brought coffee without being asked and beamed with approval at the sight of her pie. It's on the house for both of you, she insisted before bustling away. When they were alone, Hazel found herself strangely shy. I understand you're a bounty hunter. Garrett nodded, adding sugar to his coffee with precise movements. For the past 5 years. Before that, I rode with the Texas Rangers. That explains how you... She trailed off, unsure how to delicately reference his lethal efficiency. How I killed those men, he finished for her, his voice matter of fact. It's not something I take pleasure in, Miss Blackburn. But men like Four-Finger Frank don't leave many options. Please call me Hazel. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. And I wasn't judging you. You saved my life and probably the lives of others in this town. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Hazel it is. And I'm Garrett. What brought you to Copper Springs, Garrett? Surely not just those outlaws. I've been tracking them since they robbed a bank in Flagstaff. Killed 2 people there. He took a sip of his coffee. I didn't expect to find them auctioning off a schoolteacher. Hazel shuddered at the memory. I still can't believe that happened, or that no one in town tried to stop it until you arrived. Fear makes cowards of decent folks, he said, not unkindly. 6 armed men is more than most are willing to stand against. But not you. She looked at him directly. You weren't afraid. Something flickered in his eyes. I've just had more practice facing down men like that. Hazel sensed there was more to his story, perhaps much more, but didn't press. Instead, she told him about her teaching position in Missouri, her parents' death, and her plans to join her aunt in Tucson. She runs a boarding house for respectable young ladies, Hazel explained. She's offered me a place to stay while I look for teaching work. Garrett listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a sharp intelligence behind his reserved exterior. As they shared the apple pie, Hazel found herself increasingly drawn to this complex man, dangerous yet gentle, taciturn yet articulate when he chose to speak. Their conversation was interrupted when the deputy sheriff entered the cafe, making a beeline for their table. "Mr. Landon, telegram came for you," he said, handing over a folded paper. Garrett read it quickly, his expression hardening. "Thank you, deputy." After the man left, Hazel couldn't help asking, "Bad news?" "The two outlaws who escaped yesterday," Garrett said, refolding the telegram. "They joined up with the rest of Frank's gang. 8 men total now. They've taken over a mining camp about 20 miles north of here. Will you go after them?" Hazel asked, though she already knew the answer. "I have to." He met her eyes. "I leave in an hour." Disappointment washed over her, stronger than she had any right to feel after knowing him such a short time. "I understand. I'll be leaving for Tucson tomorrow myself." He nodded, his eyes lingering on her face as if memorizing it. "Be careful on that journey. The territories can be dangerous." "I've noticed," she replied with a small smile, trying to mask her sadness at their parting. They finished their coffee in companionable silence. When it was time to leave, Garrett insisted on paying despite Millie's protests that their meal was free. "A man always pays his debts," he told the cafe owner firmly, placing coins on the counter. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but Hazel barely noticed the heat as they walked slowly back toward the general store. "Garrett," she said when they reached the building, gathering her courage, "I want to thank you again, not just for saving me but for treating me like a person, not something to be auctioned or protected or pitted." His expression softened. "You're a remarkable woman, Hazel Blackburn. Any man with eyes can see that." Her heart fluttered at his words. "Will you?" she began, then faltered. What right did she have to ask anything of this man? "Be safe," she finished instead. He studied her face for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He removed a silver pin from inside his coat, a small star that glinted in the sunlight. "This was my Texas Ranger badge," he said, holding it out to her. "It's brought me luck for many years." "I couldn't possibly," she started. "Please," he interrupted. "Something to remember me by." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the gift, and the contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the heat of the day. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the badge tightly. He tipped his hat, his eyes saying what words could not, then turned and walked toward the livery stable. Hazel watched him go, the silver star warm in her palm, wondering if she would ever see Garrett Landon again. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Hazel stood outside the general store with her small borrowed carpetbag, waiting for the stagecoach that would take her to Tucson. The events of the past 2 days felt almost like a dream or a nightmare with an unexpected hero. She'd pinned Garrett's ranger badge inside her borrowed dress, close to her heart. Mrs. Patterson had noticed it when helping her pack but had asked no questions, only smiled knowingly. The distant sound of hoofbeats drew Hazel's attention, but it wasn't the stagecoach approaching. A single rider was galloping into town from the north, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. "Deputy," the man shouted, pulling his horse to a stop in front of the sheriff's office. "The stage from Tucson's been hit, about 5 miles south of town at Rattlesnake Pass." Hazel's blood ran cold. That was the same stagecoach that was supposed to pick her up. The sheriff emerged from his office, rifle in hand. Casualties? Drivers dead, the writer reported grimly. They took the passengers hostage, 3 men and 2 women. This Frank's gang, sheriff. They left a message saying they'll trade the hostages for Landon. Hazel's hand went instinctively to the badge hidden beneath her dress. Garrett had gone north after the outlaws, but clearly they'd circled around with a plan of their own. The sheriff cursed under his breath. Landon's not even here. He rode out yesterday. Then those folks are as good as dead, the writer said, shaking his head. The gang gave us until sundown to produce Landon, or they start shooting hostages. Hazel stepped forward before she could think better of it. I know where he went. All eyes turned to her. The mining camp, she continued, 20 miles north of here. If someone could ride there, that's a full day's journey round trip. The sheriff interrupted. We don't have that kind of time. Hazel's mind raced. Then let me go to the outlaws. I'll tell them Garrett's on his way. By some time. Absolutely not, the sheriff said firmly. Those men already tried to auction you off once. I won't deliver you back to them. They won't hurt me, Hazel insisted, though she had no way of knowing if that was true. They need me alive as bait for Garrett. It's too dangerous, Mrs. Patterson protested, gripping Hazel's arm. But Hazel had made up her mind. Those people will die if we do nothing, and it would be my stage if it had arrived on schedule. Those could be my fellow passengers. The sheriff studied her face, seeing her determination. You've got courage, Miss Blackburn. I'll give you that, but I can't let you go alone. I'll go with her, a gruff voice announced. An older man with a silver beard stepped forward. Name's Jenkins. I was a scout for the army before I retired here. I know every inch of this territory. The sheriff considered this, then nodded slowly. Take my fastest horses. If you can delay them until we figure something out, do it. But at the first sign of real trouble, you get the hell out of there, both of you. Within the hour, Hazel found herself riding south beside Jenkins, her heart pounding with fear and determination. The borrowed riding skirt was uncomfortable, and she was far from an experienced horsewoman, but she kept pace with the old scout. You sweet on that bounty hunter? Jenkins asked after they'd been riding for some time. Hazel flushed. I hardly know him, the old man chuckled. Don't need much time to know some things. I saw the way you two looked at each other in town. Rather than answer, Hazel asked, Do you think we can save those people? Jenkins's expression grew serious. Frank's remaining men are desperate. Desperate men are unpredictable. But if anyone can outshoot them, it's Landon. If we can reach him in time, Hazel murmured. They rode in silence after that, pushing their horses as fast as they dared in the growing heat of the day. After about an hour, Jenkins raised his hand for her to stop. Rattlesnake Pass is just ahead, he whispered, pointing to a narrow gap between 2 rocky ridges. They'll have lookouts. They dismounted and secured their horses. Then Jenkins led Hazel carefully through the scrub brush until they could see into the pass. What they saw made Hazel's blood run cold. The stagecoach sat in the middle of the trail, one wheel broken. The driver's body lay in the dirt nearby. 5 people, the passengers, sat huddled together under the watchful eyes of 3 armed men. 5 more outlaws were positioned strategically around the pass. 8 of them, just like Garrett said, Jenkins whispered. Too many to take on directly. We need to create a distraction, Hazel said, her mind working rapidly. Something to buy time. Jenkins considered this. I could circle around, maybe start a small fire to draw some of them off. No, Hazel said, a plan forming in her mind. I'll go in openly. Tell them Garrett sent me to negotiate. That's too dangerous, girl, Jenkins hissed. It's our best chance, she insisted. You go back for help. Ride north and find Garrett. I'll stall them as long as I can. Jenkins clearly didn't like the plan, but after a few moments he nodded reluctantly. If you're not back by sundown tomorrow, Landon and I are coming and shooting. Before she could lose her nerve, Hazel stood and began walking openly toward the pass. She'd only gone a few steps when a shot rang out, kicking up dirt at her feet. That's far enough, a voice called. Who the hell are you? Hazel raised her hands. My name is Hazel Blackburn. I'm here on behalf of Garrett Landon. There was a moment of silence. Then, bring her in. Two outlaws emerged from behind rocks, their rifles trained on her as they approached. They searched her roughly for weapons, then marched her down into the pass where the leader waited, a tall man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Well, he said, circling her. You're the schoolteacher Frank tried to auction. Word is, you're the reason Landon killed him and my other boys. Hazel lifted her chin. Mr. Landon sent me to negotiate the release of your hostages. The outlaw leader laughed harshly. Did he now? And where is the famous bounty hunter? He's nearby, Hazel lied smoothly. He wanted to ensure the hostages were unharmed before he showed himself. The leader's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why would Landon send a woman to do his negotiating? Hazel thought quickly. Because I'm the only one he trusts to keep my word. He knows what you tried to do to me in Copper Springs. He figures that gives me reason to want to see this resolved without more bloodshed. It was a gamble, but the leader seemed to consider her words. Tell Landon he has until sundown to surrender himself. For every hour after that, I kill a hostage. Let me speak with them, Hazel requested, gesturing toward the frightened passengers. After a moment's hesitation, the leader nodded. 5 minutes. Then you take my message back to Landon. Hazel approached the hostages, 2 elderly men, a middle-aged businessman, and 2 women who appeared to be in their 30s. She knelt beside them, speaking softly. Help is coming, she assured them. But it may take time. Is anyone injured? Just scared. One of the women whispered. Who are you? Someone trying to help, Hazel replied. When the time comes, be ready to move quickly. She spent the remaining minutes offering what comfort she could, then stood to face the outlaw leader again. I'll deliver your message, she said firmly. But know this, if any harm comes to these people, Garrett Landon won't stop until every one of you is dead. The leader smirked. Big talk from a schoolteacher. Now get going before I change my mind about letting you leave. Hazel walked back up the trail, expecting at any moment to feel a bullet in her back. Only when she was out of sight of the lookouts did she veer off the path to where she'd left her horse. To her surprise, Jenkins was still there. Couldn't leave you, girl, he explained gruffly. Thought you might need backup. We need to find Garrett, she said urgently. They're going to start killing hostages at sundown. They rode north as fast as their horses could manage, Hazel praying they would reach the mining camp in time. The sun climbed higher in the sky, then began its descent, each passing hour increasing her anxiety. It was mid-afternoon when they finally spotted a plume of smoke rising from behind a ridge, the mining camp. As they crested the hill, Hazel's heart leapt. Below them, a group of miners stood in a circle, and in the center was a familiar tall figure in a duster coat. Garrett, she called, urging her tired horse forward. He spun at the sound of her voice, disbelief crossing his features as she rode into the camp. Hazel, what are you doing here? She quickly explained about the stagecoach attack and the hostages, watching his expression harden with each word. I knew they'd try something like this, he said grimly, but I didn't expect them to circle back south. We have to hurry, Hazel urged. Sundown isn't far off. Garrett turned to the miners. Change of plans. I need 5 men who can handle themselves in a fight. Within half an hour, they were riding south. Garrett, Jenkins, Hazel, and 5 grim-faced miners armed with rifles and determination. Garrett had initially tried to convince Hazel to stay behind, but she had flatly refused. I've seen their position, she argued. I know where the lookouts are posted, and those people trust me. Though clearly unhappy about it, Garrett had relented, but insisted she stay well back when the fighting started. As they rode, he outlined his plan. Jenkins and 2 miners will create a diversion from the east. The rest of us will come in from the west. When the shooting starts, Hazel will get to the hostages and lead them to safety. And you? Hazel asked, not liking how he spoke as if his own safety was an afterthought. His eyes met hers briefly. I'll deal with their leader. They reached the vicinity of Rattlesnake Pass with about an hour of daylight remaining. After securing their horses, the group split up as planned. Garrett led Hazel and 3 miners on a circuitous route that brought them to the western edge of the pass. When you hear the first shots from Jenkins's group, count to 30, then make your move, Garrett instructed her. Stay low, get to the hostages, and head straight back the way we came. Don't stop for anything. Hazel nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Garrett's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Be careful, he said softly, his eyes conveying more than words could express. You too, she whispered back. They didn't have to wait long. A series of shots rang out from the eastern ridge, followed by shouts of alarm from the outlaws. Just as Garrett had predicted, several ran toward the commotion, leaving the hostages less heavily guarded. Hazel counted to 30, then began making her way down the rocky slope toward the stagecoach. Behind her, Garrett and the miners opened fire, creating a deadly crossfire that sent the remaining outlaws diving for cover. Heart-pounding, Hazel reached the frightened passengers. Follow me, she urged, helping the elderly men to their feet. Quickly, look out, one of the women screamed. Hazel turned to see the outlaw leader emerging from behind the stagecoach, his face contorted with rage and a pistol aimed directly at her. You lying little, he began, but never finished the sentence. A single shot rang out and the outlaw crumpled to the ground. Hazel looked up to see Garrett standing on a rock outcropping, his still smoking pistol in hand. Go, he shouted to her. Get them out of here. Hazel led the hostages up the slope as gunfire continued to echo through the pass. When they reached the sheltered area where the horses waited, she turned back, unable to leave without knowing Garrett was safe. What she saw made her blood freeze. Garrett was locked in a hand-to-hand struggle with one of the outlaws, both men dangerously close to the edge of a steep drop. As she watched in horror, they toppled over the edge and disappeared from view. Garrett! She screamed, starting back down the slope before Jenkins caught her arm. Wait, girl! It's too dangerous! But Hazel pulled free, scrambling down toward where she'd seen Garrett fall. The gunfire had largely stopped the battle, apparently over, but she barely noticed, focused only on reaching that precipice. When she arrived at the spot, she peered over, terrified of what she might see. About 15 feet below, a narrow ledge jutted from the rock face. Garrett lay there, motionless, while the outlaw's body had continued to fall to the rocky ground far below. Garrett, she called. His eyes opened slowly, finding hers. Don't move. We'll get you up. With Jenkins's help and some rope from the miners' supplies, they managed to reach Garrett and pull him to safety. He had a nasty gash on his forehead and winced when he moved his left arm, but was otherwise intact. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, he said when she knelt beside him, her hands gently examining his wounds. I told you to get to safety, and leave you to fall off a cliff? She retorted, blinking back tears of relief. Not likely, Mr. Landon. As the sun finally set over Rattlesnake Pass, the hostages were safe, the remaining outlaws either dead or fled, and Hazel found herself sitting beside a campfire, watching as Jenkins bandaged Garrett's arm. "Looks like you'll live," the old scout declared, tying off the bandage. "Though that arm'll be sore for a while." "I've had worse," Garrett replied, his eyes finding Hazel across the fire. When Jenkins moved away to check on the others, Garrett shifted closer to Hazel. "You could have been killed today," he said quietly. "So could you," she countered. "We both took risks because it was the right thing to do." He studied her face in the firelight. "You were supposed to be on your way to Tucson by now." "Plans change," she said with a small smile. "Sometimes for the better." His hand found hers warm and solid. "When I saw you riding into that mining camp, I thought I was seeing things. I couldn't believe you'd come all that way." "For the hostages," she clarified, then added more softly. "And for you." Garrett's fingers tightened around hers. "I've spent 5 years hunting down the worst men in the territories. Never stayed in one place long enough to consider another way of living." Hazel's heart quickened. "And now I'm thinking maybe it's time for a change." His eyes, reflecting the dancing flames, held a warmth she hadn't seen before. "If I were to head to Tucson, do you think there might be teaching positions for retired rangers?" Hazel laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I believe my aunt knows most everyone in Tucson. I'm sure she could make inquiries." "I'd appreciate that," he said, his smile transforming his face, making him look younger, lighter. They sat together as the stars appeared overhead, their hands still joined, the future suddenly full of possibilities neither had imagined just days before. 2 months later, Hazel stood on the porch of her aunt's boarding house in Tucson, watching as Garrett approached on horseback. He'd taken one final bounty hunting job, tracking down the last 2 members of Frank's gang before hanging up his guns for good. Now he rode toward her, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her waiting. He'd telegraphed ahead, but she'd been watching the road for hours, unable to contain her anticipation. "Welcome home," she said when he dismounted and climbed the porch steps. He took off his hat, his hair shorter now but still curling slightly at the edges. "Home," he repeated, as if testing how the word felt. "I like the sound of that." Hazel stepped into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and open air. "The school board approved your application. You start teaching history to the older boys next month." Garrett chuckled. "From bounty hunter to schoolteacher. My old ranger captain would never believe it." "Do you regret the decision?" she asked, looking up at him. His eyes, clear as the Arizona sky, held nothing but certainty. "Not for a moment." He touched her cheek gently. "Though I do have one request." "What's that?" From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. "That you consider becoming Mrs. Landon, preferably soon." Hazel's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small diamond that caught the late afternoon sun. "The sheriff in Copper Springs is also a justice of the peace," Garrett continued. "He said he'd be honored to perform the ceremony, if you're willing." Tears of happiness blurred Hazel's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'm willing." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Hazel reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, how what had begun as the worst day of her life had ultimately led her to this moment, to this man who had risked everything for her when she was nothing more than a stranger to him. "I still have your ranger badge," she told him, touching the spot near her heart where she kept it pinned inside her dress. Garrett smiled, drawing her close. "Keep it. It brought us both the best luck of our lives." Their kiss, witnessed only by the setting sun and the desert breeze, sealed a promise that had begun in danger but would continue in love, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky stretching endless above them.